There are not many AAA games that are truly considered universally to be awful. There are disappointing games, games with unused potential, but truly bad games with failing grades like 4 out of 10 are quite rare. Out of the very few, Duke Nukem Forever is a famous example. To say the game was heavily criticized is to say the bare minimum. This game was hated by everyone and is often used as a negative example of what a game should not be. But after 13 years from its release, I gave this title a chance, and my experience with it was different than what I anticipated. But first things first, roll the intro. If there is a game that went through a development hell longer than the one Duke Nukem Forever went through, I will be quite surprised. For the people who are not aware, Duke Nukem Forever was planned as a direct sequel to the much more famous Duke Nukem 3D, an old-style FPS game released all the way back in 1996 for the PC and the Sega Mega Drive Genesis. The sequel was announced a year later and released all the way in 2011, marking a 14-year development cycle. Contrary to what you may imagine, more years of development did not result in an outstanding game. Quite the opposite. The troublesome development that changed hand over and over became a Frankenstein of assets and components from different decades, resulting in one of the biggest failures in gaming history. In my mind, I would have never thought I would give this game a try, but my good friend Tito thought otherwise, believing this infamous game to be the perfect Christmas gift to give me, because of course he did. He insisted he had played the game itself back in the PlayStation 3 days and claimed it was not half bad. Quite a statement for a game that has 45 on Metacritic, but oh well, who am I not to trust a friend? And well, as I will soon discuss, it turned out I had a somewhat good time playing Duke Nukem Forever in 2014. The game has its flaws, quite many in fact, but after playing the full campaign plus its DLC, I can confirm that the game is actually alright, even fun, playable despite all of its problems. It is far from a masterpiece, but after 13 years from its release, I believe Duke Nukem Forever deserves a fair trial, one that takes in consideration the game itself for what it is, rather than what was promised. I will not go through all the 14 years of development to explain what Duke Nukem Forever was supposed to be. Long story short, the game started as a fairly straightforward sequel, but since the development of the title was so long, the game became a half-baked reboot, firstly developed by 3D Realms, the original developers of the franchise, and then completed by Gearbox, the same developers of Borderlands 2 years prior. As you could have probably guessed by now from the gameplay in the background, Duke Nukem Forever is a single-player first-person shooter. Due to their long development, the game mixes various mechanics from various generations of shooters, being some sort of a crossroad between old-school FPS games like Doom, Wolfenstein, and of course the original Duke Nukem 3D, and the newer FPS of the time like Call of Duty, Half-Life, and Halo. The element that made the original game distinctive was its sense of humor, quite crude in comparison to more serious shooters that came before. We're talking about Teens joke, don't expect an elaborated satire on society or something. This is still kept true for Forever. The narrative is just a premise to have a chaotic, fun and wacky adventure, like in the original game. But alright, let's address the elephant in the room here. What is Duke Nukem Forever more precisely, and why was it so hated? Well, the premise of the game does not require a long explanation to answer those two questions. Duke Nukem is a single-player title with a campaign that lasts about 8 to 10 hours that has a bizarre plot. Something about an alien invasion, but believe me, that's not very important. The game is a fairly linear shooter, although it has some various different areas to explore and some mix-up in the core gameplay structure, like the driving or the platform sections. The game was heavily criticized because, quite objectively, it looks and feels quite low budget, especially considering the IP. I remind you that this game was released in 2011, the same year as Crysis 2, and many years after Bioshock, Halo and Half-Life 2. In 2012, Far Cry 3 would be released, and a year after that Bioshock Infinite, both on the same consoles mind you. I think you can visually see the contrast better than any explanation of mine. And it is not just about graphical aspect of the game to be targeted, but also its plot and its gameplay. Plot-wise, the game was disliked because the storyline felt uninspired and banal. While in the 2010s, developers started to craft more complex and complete stories in their shooters, Duke Nukem Forever's plot in comparison was written by an 8-year-old, filled with nonsense and zero character development. Of course no one was expecting a Duke Nukem game to tell a profound tale. After all, the original game was fun because it was a parody of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis movies like Terminator, Predator and Die Hard. However, there is a difference between a good parody and a knockoff, and many players felt Forever's plot to be more like the latter. In the gameplay front, the situation is not much better. As introduced, the Frankenstein mix between game mechanics of different ages did not work quite as intended. You have a game that aims to be an old shooter while introducing long and pointless cutscenes. not to mention the quote-unquote platform and puzzle sections that break the flow of the adventure. Being a merge of different games made players feel disorientated. It didn't feel unique, but rather half-baked, as if it was incomplete, it was made in the wrong way. Also, when the game was released on consoles, many were the players who complained about bugs and technical problems with the title. In a nutshell, the game was at the wrong place at the wrong time, far behind games released in the same generation and off-putting for the players who played it at launch, creating an ever-increasing storm of criticism. Only mentioning the game by name became synonymous with bad quality. I started playing the game knowing all of this, knowing that Duke Nukem Forever was considered by all the worst video game release in the 2010s, if not of all times. I downloaded the game from Steam, booted it up, and played Duke Nukem Forever and its DLC, The Doctor Who Cloned Me, from start to finish in a handful of days, finding myself truly positively surprised. All of the problems that I have addressed are true, and I can confirm that yes, the game's graphics are not the best, the plot is uninspired, and the gameplay is a combination of different games that not always works. Yet the biggest redeeming quality of the title that is not often discussed is its gameplay. Not gameplay, gunplay, the shooting itself. The game is a frenetic first-person shooter where there is a great variety of weapons and enemies, where I often find myself changing tactics in order to adapt to the various situations. The campaign has a surprising amount of different styles of levels. At times Duke finds himself in crowded buildings, at times on the highway, at times underwater, and at times in very unique places I will not spoil. The game is always moving forward, and even if played at the harder difficulty like I did, the placement of the checkpoints is well thought out. It is hard for the player to get stuck somewhere. The DLC more specifically expands upon the content the original game has, making it more evident that the title has potential. Enemies are just fun to face off in Duke Nukem Forever, both regular and bosses. And while the pace of the game is awkward due to the unnecessary cutscenes and gameplay sections where you do not fight, the moments where the player does fight gun blazing and the momentum increases are the moments that suddenly make the game fun to play. And just to sidetrack for a moment here, one of the game design choice Duke Nukem Forever decided to implement in the gameplay was the ability to interact with various items across the world, like lifting weights, playing arcades, getting drinks from vending machines, and even drawing on the whiteboards. At the time this was criticized by players because it felt unnecessary to implement such features when the game took so long to develop, yet I find these small additions neat, and gamers now usually do enjoy details like these that make the world more believable and interactable. This is just an example of many of the critiques the players had at the time that are no longer that relevant, and perhaps this is the best time to shift my focus to the infamous plot. Yes, the description I gave before still holds true. The game is immature and over the top, not to mention very politically incorrect. I do not endorse it, something in net contrast with games like Bioshock released around the same time. But while at the time the contrast was too big to ignore, playing the game after so many years it is less evident and felt by the player. If anything, it is a breath of fresh air. The game is cathartic and comically dumb, no questions asked, but the plot does not take itself too seriously, and neither should the player. Duke Nukem is a character that needs no development, because its self-centered nature is what makes Duke unique. It's ludicrous, nonsensical, immature, but something quite rare to find. An ugly charm, but a charm nonetheless. The graphics are also not as bad as they seem, at least when the game is played after so much time. Of course, if compared to games released the same year, the downgrades are noticeable, and players would have rightfully pointed them out. But if the game is played as retro gaming, and you just pretend the game was released a few years prior, suddenly the art and technical direction are permissible. Nothing to write home about, mind you, but still alright. Also, as a footnote, I played the PC version of the game, and I know that there were some future patches that made the graphics a bit smoother and did some quality of life improvements. For instance, the console version of the game only allowed you to carry 2 weapons rather than 4, making the gameplay more tedious. Furthermore, in my 12 hours of gameplay, I found only 2 or 3 bugs total, and the game was running smoothly at 60 FPS, definitely not the case when the game first launched on consoles. The whole point of the video and the conclusion that I want to reach is that Duke Nukem Forever is a fun game to play. The game does not do anything exceptionally well, nor anything particularly creative that we have not seen before, but the one thing the game does not fail at is to be fun, just fun to play, something that in my books automatically makes the game enjoyable. Experiencing this old title made me realize that maybe players and reviewers of the time were a bit overcritical about Duke's new adventure, and actually I don't think I'm the only one who thinks this way. When opening the Steam page, I saw that the most recent reviews of the title are actually fairly positive. The game originally had 50% positive reviews, then 65%, and now 70%. All reviews coming from players that presumably played the game at a discount and after so many years from release. Again, not the creme of FPS games released in those years, not even FPS published by 2K, but an okay title that is worth giving a try. Duke Nukem Forever may be an action game that you may end up enjoying. Its fun and frenetic gameplay, its absurd plot, and creative levels result in a beautiful mess, one that I would give a passing grade that it did not get 13 years ago. Keep it up, Duke! Don't keep us waiting for the sequel. Duke Nukem Forever will, and I gotta make the play on words here, forever be remembered as the failed sequel with one of the longest development cycles ever seen in gaming. This video alone cannot change this fact. However, after so much time, I wish the game to be remembered more for what it did well and less for what it didn't achieve. If you are a fan of old school FPS games like Doom, Shadow Warrior and Wolfenstein, and you have those free euros to spend on sales, do give Duke Nukem Forever a chance. It might not be the game of the year Gearbox Software was aiming it to be, but it's a fun game to play nonetheless. In my friends, and now my opinion, severely underrated. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many Duke Nukem Forever's times watching today's video. I'm still in disbelief that I made a video defending this old forbidden game, yet, well, here I am. Thanks, Tito. Did you guys play Duke Nukem Forever? When and how was it? Let me know down in the comments below. I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci.